Okay, year 11, so the next video is video 8. Video 8 is focusing on another aspect of life in Nazi Germany. Last time we looked at what it was like for women. This time we're going to be looking at what it was like for young people. So we're going to be looking at how young people were affected during the years of Nazi occupation. Now, while we're looking at this, we're going to look at two key aspects. We're going to look at what it was like for a young person in the youth organisations, the Hitler Youth, the main way that Hitler wanted to attract young people to the Nazi way of thinking. And we're also going to be looking at schools. How did the education system change? What did people learn on a day-to-day basis? How did the Nazis try to change Germany through its schools? So we'll look at those two aspects over the next 5-10 minutes or so. The first thing we're going to look at is the Hitler Youth. So the Hitler Youth was, as I said, the driving force behind the way Hitler wanted to indoctrinate and push forward his aims for Germany in terms of how he was going to get the young people on side. So the Hitler Youth was for all children and teenagers over the age of 10 years old. It wasn't compulsory until the very late 1930s, but it was expected that most young people joined the Hitler Youth. We have the Hitler Youth, the boys group, and we have the League of German Maidens for the girls. Now, sometimes you might see Hitler Youth as an umbrella term for boys and girls, so don't be surprised in your exam if you're reading things about the Hitler Youth and it starts talking about girls. If you want the specifics, the Hitler Youth was for the boys, the League of German Maidens was for the girls. So, what did Hitler want from young people in schools and in the Hitler Youth as we're focusing on? He had three aims: preparing the boys for military service and being in the armed forces. Most men, or boys growing up to be men, were expected to do time in the army or in the navy or in the air force and fight for Germany. Part of Hitler's policy of wanting to expand and be the Thousand-Year Reich. Girls, on the other hand, the second aim this is, girls were expected to be good mothers in the future. So their young organisations were training them up for rearing children, having as many children as possible, and being good mothers at home. And the third key aim of the Hitler Youth organisations was indoctrination. Can we make these people, these boys, these girls, loyal Nazis and follow the way of thinking of Adolf Hitler and his closest advisors? So that's the aims of the Hitler Youth and schools, in fact, but that's what Hitler wanted. So let's look at what Hitler did in these Hitler Youth groups, and then let's have a look at the successes and failures of that. So to begin with, we're going to be looking at some of the actions of the boys groups. So boys, after joining the organisation at about 10 years old, were trained in these military things. So on the weekends or on holidays from school, students would be expected to go camping for the Hitler Youth. Would be expected to go away. Boys would be learning military skills, learning to throw grenades, not real ones, obviously, throwing grenades, crawling under barbed wire, sports, activities, boxing, all sorts of activities that are preparing you in those skills to be a soldier of the future. Map reading is another example. Girls, on the other hand, would still be expected to be active and be involved in sporting activities of some kind, but also would be learning those skills of being a good mother in the future. But boys and girls, the whole focus of the Hitler Youth was on fun. Fun in the way the Nazis were gearing people up. So it was throwing grenades and all these activities for boys, and these girls would be doing motherhood skills, but maybe they would try and do an activity that was seen as a fun activity. And the whole point was, being a Nazi is great, being a Nazi is fun, being a Nazi is exciting. The idea was that children would do these activities, going away on these camps with their friends, and they would have a great time. If you could do that, you could get people feeling like, actually, life is good as a Nazi. We also look at the Hitler Youth as a way of sending people away on these camping trips, as a way of, especially for the boys, preparing them for that idea that maybe these boys would be going away and fighting in different countries in the future. So it was good preparation for them as well. So as well as being fun and exciting and wanting you to be a good Nazi, it was training you for future events that probably would happen in your life. Class didn't matter in the Hitler Youth. So the idea was that boys and girls would mix with people from upper class, middle class, lower class, so that everybody got behind the same message, which is kind of a nice idea really, that class didn't matter. The idea was everybody, if you are a Nazi, follows the same path, follows the same rules and works together. We also need to think about what one of the main purposes of this was, as well as being exciting, was keeping it this brainwash, this indoctrination all the way through. So singing songs round the campfire, taking part in activities and reading stories that promoted the Nazi message. So the Hitler Youth was really geared up to making it fun, exciting and indoctrinating behind the way of Nazi thinking. We then need to look at the successes and failures of that. So let's look at the successes. Why was the Hitler Youth so successful in some ways? You hear any first-hand accounts of people involved in the Hitler Youth. It was seen as a really exciting time. People enjoyed their activities. They were enthusiastic about the things they would be doing under Hitler's regime. So those activities of throwing grenades, if you're a young 12-year-old boy and you be quite excited about being given permission to practice throwing grenades, what's better than that? So it was, a lot of people found it as a really exciting and enjoyable time. Parents enjoyed the fact that their children were being given a purpose, being given something to do. Lots of the Hitler Youth groups would maybe organise things for charity or old people, or set up organisations to help the community, and parents saw that as a really good way of their children spending their time trying to bring them up as good people. So some parents were really, really supportive of that. The hikes, the sports, was good for creating a healthy, fit, young population for Germany, and again that increased happiness as well. People felt like they were getting out there, they were doing things that were worthwhile. We also need to think about with that popularity comes that indoctrination. Remember, Hitler wanted to indoctrinate those young people into believing the boys' roles, the girls' roles, and being a loyal Nazi. And if you were enjoying your time, it was being spoon-fed, and people were believing in this Nazi regime, and people were starting to grow up to be loyal Nazis. There were some negatives there, it wasn't all positive. We have some people going against the system, some people going against the Hitler Youth. A perfect example is the Edelweiss Pirates, a young organisation that rejected the Hitler Youth, did not arrive to the Hitler Youth camps and the weekends away, and they actually ran their own activities. They'd go up in the mountains, do their own walks, but also wear clothes that weren't permitted, would engage in drinking alcohol, etc., to try and go against the Nazi system, including beating up members of the Hitler Youth. So there was rebellious young people in Germany. By 1938, it was made compulsory to be part of the Hitler Youth, but around 18% of young people in Germany still were not members by the outbreak of World War II in 1939. 18% is a significant amount of the population, showing you that not everybody was fully involved. This might be mainly because this indoctrination just didn't wash with some children. Their parents maybe were having a certain political view at home, and these children didn't want to alter from that. Some children just saw it as something that they had to do rather than something they wanted to do. Being forced to believe a certain way meant some people not join, or if they did join, there was also that aspect of people not really engaging, people being told and being hammered home this Nazi message but switching off. So it did have its successes, it did have its failures, but Hitler was really, really motivated by trying to get the young people on his side. And we have to remember when we look at the Hitler Youth, despite there being that 18%, these activities were fun, they were exciting, and a lot of young people were believing in the Nazi message. And if you were to get an exam question, you might get some sources of people talking about the Hitler Youth, and it's important to remember those exciting activities that made people excited to be a Nazi. We then need to look at schools as well, because part of attracting young people to the Nazi way of thinking is not just weekends away and holiday breaks, but actually is what do they do in school. If we look at different aspects of school, teachers in school were at the forefront of making sure the Nazi message was spread. So teachers would have to be part of the Nazi party, they would go to camps for training to be teaching in the ideal Nazi way. You had to be a loyal Nazi to be a teacher, or be seen to be a loyal Nazi, which then if your teachers are acting as role models for students, that's obviously going to have an influence on some pupils. Okay, teachers are in that really important position. The curriculum as well was centred on making sure that Nazis got what they wanted from young people. So Here it is again. Boys were trained in those skills that would be seen important for the military or the men's jobs. So map reading skills, science, mathematics, and then the armed forces skills. Whereas girls were being trained in domestic science, cooking, things that would make them good mothers. And that was seen as important not just to hit the youth, but in schools as well. And the curriculum was centred around that. However, there were certain things that all students had to do. PE was prominent on the curriculum for schools. Every day almost, students would engage in a physical activity of some kind. It was important to have a healthy population. Women to have children, boys to be in the army. We also have the teaching of eugenics and race studies, trying to promote this idea of the master race, wanting the Nazi young children, to be loyal Nazis and to believe in all these things that they were hearing about a master race, who was better than others. Jewish children in schools, before they were banned from schools, were openly criticised by teachers, openly mocked, pointed out in class about what was wrong with them by the other pupils. This was encouraged. History, for example, was rewritten to make sure that people got the message that the Nazis wanted to get across about a great history, and that things in the past the defeat in World War I had not been Germany's fault. We also have the idea that schools were under Nazi control. Everything was censored. Textbooks were approved by the Ministry of Propaganda. So there was no chance of anything filtering into schools that the Nazis didn't want people to hear. There was also elite schools for people who maybe would be generals, potential administrative roles within the higher ranks of the Nazi Party. There was special schools as well set up, so the Nazis made sure there was progression for those who were displaying really important attributes to be a loyal high-up Nazi. So schools were attracting people, or were promoting the Nazi ideas. The Hitler Youth was also doing that, whilst also trying to subtly, in some ways, is making them do activities that maybe don't realise this is a Nazi message, but actually having a good time and thinking the times are good, why would you want these things to change? So trying to indoctrinate the young people followed some different ways, and it was those two key things that we need to remember. The Hitler Youth, making it exciting, making being a Nazi fun, and schools, hearing that relentless message every day about why Germany is great, which type of person is great, and what is your role in the future.